people want. Well, so glad to see you all again. Here we are. It's the culmination of our ham radio class. Amateur radio, yes, it's still a thing. And we've been studying hard, going through 9 chapters in this book, the American Radio Relay League License Manual, 5th edition. And if you're just stumbling upon this video and you go, well, maybe I'd like to study for my ham radio license as well, find the playlist for the technician class, that's what this is, and go back to the beginning, and you too can get your ham radio license by passing a 35-question multiple choice test. Don't need to know Morse code anymore. You just pass the test, which is usually given locally at your amateur radio club that might be in your town, or you can take a test online. There are online resources for you to do this as well. So, as I mentioned, this is the culmination. What we're going to be doing tonight is taking 2 practice tests, 2 35-question tests, and then we'll see how we do. We'll take an intermission in the middle so you can get up and stretch and move around, and then we'll be done. So let's go ahead and get started with practice test number 14. And as I mentioned last week, the numbering comes, and because I haven't put up my slideshow yet, Bruce is looking at me funny. There we go, let's try that. Yeah, there's practice test 14. We've taught this class a number of times before, and we do 3 practice tests for each class. So we'll have practice tests 14 and 15 tonight, and I've made available all of the earlier practice tests as well. Now the practice tests were generated at this URL. It's the ARRL's exam review website, where you can review questions based on the chapters of the book, and you can take practice tests. And I recommend, because of the size of the question pool, that you take at least a dozen practice tests, maybe more, because we just had a conversation before we got started. Oh, some questions popped up you've never seen before. So that can happen, and hopefully it happens in the practice test, not on your real test. So anyway, what I'd like you to do, if you're playing along at home, if you're watching us on YouTube, and we have 8, thank you for being with us, and please get out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, your preference. And what I'm going to have you do is we'll read, you'll see the questions on the screen, and just write down question 1 and then your answer A, B, C, or D, and go on from there. I'll be looking to our Zoom classroom. People, when you take the test and you see the question and you've got your answer down, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand briefly, that cues me to, when I see a number of people have done that, then I can go on to the next question. Because of the nature of this TV thing, we do kind of move right along. When you actually take your test, there is no time limit. So you can, have as long as you need, and so it may feel a little rushed here tonight, but don't worry about that, because that won't exist in your actual test session. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me say good luck to you, and I will not be reading the questions or answers unless somebody needs me to, but I will when we go over the answers for those who might be visually impaired. We have some folks that listen to the class. So here we go. Here is question 1. Raise your hand if you would when you're done answering. All right, and here is question 2. And moving on to question 3. And if I'm going too fast, just unmute and let me know. And now on to question 4. Very good. And question 5. Okay, and here we go with question 6. And now, question 7. And question 8. Here is question 9. And question 10. And on to question 11. Here's question 12. And question 13. And question 14. Question 15. And question 16. And here is question 17. And here is question 18. And on to question 19. And here is question 20. And question 21. And question 22. And here comes question 23, We can always go back to any questions. And question 24. Question 25. And now, question 26. And here is question 27. And next up is 28, which is a schematic, which is asking what is component 1? And question 29. And here is question 30. Question 31. And now, question 32. And question 33. And question 34. And question 35. All right, if there are any questions you'd like me to go back to that you'd like to see again, just unmute and let me know.
Gary, number 15 and number 5.
Okay, number 15 and number 5. Let's go to 15 first. There's 15.
Thank you.
Okay, and now here's number 5.
Thanks.
All right, anyone else? Any other questions? If you're watching on YouTube, you could put a number in the question number in the chat, and I would see it.
33.
33. All right, let's go there.
It's on you.
There's 33.
Okay.
And
Thanks.
you bet. All right, not hearing anything else, let's see how we did. So number 1, what describes the number of times per second that an alternating current makes a complete cycle? That's frequency, 1D. 2, what is a grid locator? It's a letter number designator assigned to a geographic location, 2B. 3, which of the following types of propagation is most commonly associated with occasional strong signals on the 10, 6, and 2 meter bands? That's sporadic E, 3C. And 4, yes?
Gary, real quick. So, sporadic E, is that when the radio frequency, the signals get caught up or skip from the E portion of the ionosphere,
That
E
is,
layer?
that is correct. And the E layer doesn't form solidly. What happens is gaseous clouds will occasionally form at that level. And it's, if we can get reflections off of those, but it doesn't happen all the time. It's very intermittent. That's why we call it sporadic. So it's sporadic because it only happens occasionally, and it's E for the E layer. So you're right.
Okay.
Number 4, what formula is used to calculate current in a circuit? Ohm's law, I equals E divided by R, 4A. And 5, which type of voice mode is often used for long-distance weak signal contacts on the VHF and UHF bands? That would be single sideband. Single sideband signals can be received when they're very weak, 5A. And 6, in the United States, what circuit does black wire insulation indicate in a 3-wire 120-volt cable? That's the hot wire. 6B. And 7, what language may you use for identification when operating in a phone subband? Since you have a United States license, English, 7D. And 8, what property of a radio wave defines its polarization? It is the orientation of the electric field, 8C. And 9, what is the normal term for an FCC-issued amateur license? 10 years, 9C. And 10, when may an amateur station transmit without identifying on the air? When transmitting signals to control model craft, 10B. And 11, what does the abbreviation RF mean? Radio frequency signals of all types, 11B. And 12, which instrument is used to measure electric current? That's an ammeter, 12B. And 13, what electronic component allows current to flow in only one direction? That's a diode, 13A. And which is equal to 3.525 megahertz? That is equivalent to 3,525 kilohertz, 14B. And 15, what is the function of a SPDT, single pole dual throw switch? A single circuit is switched between one of two other circuits, 15B. And 16, in which direction does a half-wave dipole antenna radiate the strongest signal? Broadside to the antenna, 16C. And 17, which of the following is combined with an inductor to make a resonant circuit? A capacitor, 17C. An inductor and capacitor make up a resonant circuit. And
Gary, is that because of the out of phase and they slowly become in phase capacitor?
It's because they store energy, the inductor in a magnetic field, the capacitor in an electric field, and they're 180 degrees out of phase with each other, and they just exchange energy back and forth between the two in a resonant circuit.
Right. Okay. That's what I thought.
That's the magic.
Okay, thanks.
18, who does the FCC presume to be the control operator of an amateur station? The station licensee, 18C. And 19, when do FCC rules not apply to the operation of an amateur station? FCC rules always apply, 19D. Now remember, one FCC rule is that in an emergency, you can go out of band, out of your class of license. But that's an FCC rule. They always apply. 20, what kind of data can be transmitted by APRS? Well, it could be weather data, it could be a text message, it could be GPS position data. All of those choices are correct, 20B. And 21, which Q signal indicates that you're receiving interference from other stations? QRM, M for man-made, 21B. And 22, what telemetry information is typically transmitted by satellite beacons? Health and status of the satellite, 22C. And 23, how is a specific group of stations selected on a digital voice transceiver? It's by entering the group's identification code. They're talking about DMR here, 23A. You use the touchpad on the front of the radio. And 24, what is a likely cause of irregular fading of signals propagated by the ionosphere? Random combining of signals arriving via different paths, also known as multipath, 24D. And 25, what might be a problem if you receive a report that your audio signal through an FM repeater is distorted or unintelligible? Well, all of these could be true. You might be in a bad location, or your batteries might be running low, or your transmitter is slightly off frequency. So 25A, all of these choices. And 26, which amateur band includes 146.52 megahertz, 2 meters, 26B. And you could also get close to that by taking, remember our formula, 300 divided by the frequency in megahertz to get you the approximate meter band. All right, 27, which of the following is part of the basis and purpose of the amateur radio service? Advancing skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. You are an artiste, 27C. And in our schematic diagram, what is component number 1? It is a resistor, 28C. And 29, which of the following is an important safety rule to remember when using a crank-up tower? Some people have said that the longest answer, if you don't know, the longest answer is right. Well, in this case, it certainly was. This type of tower must not be climbed unless it is retracted or mechanical safety locking devices have been installed. 29A.
It's not that it shouldn't be painted, Gary?
No, you can paint them. That's no problem. 30, what is the meaning of the procedural signal CQ? That means you're calling any station, 30D. And 31, what is an electronic keyer? It's a device that assists in the manual or hand sending of Morse code, 31B. And 32, what is the definition of duty cycle during the averaging time for RF exposure? We're concerned about the percentage of time that a transmitter is transmitting, 32B. Broadcasters transmit 100% of the time, so their duty cycle is 100%. Whereas hams, we maybe only transmit and then we receive, so it may be 50%. 33, what is the function of the SSB/CW/FM switch on a VHF power amplifier? These are the VHF power bricks. It sets the amplifier for proper operation in the selected mode. Specifically, it changes the bias of the output transistors. You require Class A bias for single sideband. Class C is fine for CW and FM, so 33D. And 34, which instrument can be used to determine SWR, standing wave ratio? A directional wattmeter, 34C. Although I particularly like the iambic pentameter. Well, that's something else.
Gary, another thing, let me ask you this question. Is that synonymous with an antenna analyzer?
No.
Or if not, antenna analyzer do again?
Well, an antenna analyzer is not on this list, so you couldn't have picked it. But an antenna analyzer will determine standing wave ratio. What a directional wattmeter does is it works with your transmitter. You transmit a signal and you measure in the forward direction, and then you turn a little slug to the opposite, and you measure in the reverse direction, and then you make a calculation, which will give you the standing wave ratio. That's a directional wattmeter. So it's one of the devices we showed. Bird makes directional wattmeters. And 35, why is coaxial cable the most common feed line for amateur radio antenna systems? Convenience. It is easy to use and requires few special installation considerations. Whereas ladder line or things like that, you have to keep away from metal, things like that. So 35D. So the question is, did you have 26 correct? Or no more than 9 wrong? If you did, it's double thumbs up. You passed. So I'm very proud, but we're not done. Let's go ahead and take 5 minutes. We'll get up and stretch, move around, get something to drink, get a clean sheet of paper, and then we'll take our last practice test together in 5 minutes. And we are back. Hope you got refreshed and got a chance to stretch a little bit. When you pass your exam, and I'm telling you, you will pass your exam, the next step is to find like-minded people. And what I want you to do is to find a good local ham club. ARRL has a resource. Bruce, if you take the laptop, please. Here's their Find a Club URL. And it's a place where you can find people who are already in the hobby, who can mentor you, or as they say in ham radio, Elmer you into getting on the air, which is your next big assignment. And a good ham club is worth its weight in gold. It may be where you're going to be taking your upcoming exam. Maybe as simple as that. But if not, you can Google for ham clubs in your area, or talk to other folks. If you're stuck or whatnot, let me know, and I'll try to find you a local ham club, because we want to get you on the air and we want to get you active. That's the plan. All right. So we're going to be taking practice test 15. This is the last one, and again, it was developed using this website, the American Radio Relay League's Exam Review website. I didn't create the test, they did. So, you know the drill, 35 questions. You can number your piece of paper, an A, B, C, or D. Once again, I wish you the best of luck. Don't sweat it, you can do it. And here is question number 1. And now, question 2. And question 3 is a schematic, and they're asking, what is component 8? And now, question 4. And question 5. And question 6. And here's question 7. And question 8. Here is question 9. And question 10. And question 11. And here we go with question 12. And question 13. Next up is 14. And here is question 15. And question 16. And now question 17. Here is question 18. And now question 19. And here is question 20. And now question 21. And here is question 22. And 23. And question 24. next up, question 25. And question 26. Question 27. And here is question 28. And question 29. Here's 30. And now question 31. And question 32. Question 33. And 34. And 35. All right, are there any questions you'd like me to go back to, you'd like another look at? I'm not seeing anybody saying yes or unmuting. All right, let's see how we did. How did we do? And by we, I mean you and I as your instructor. All right. What reading indicates that an ohm meter is connected across a large discharged capacitor? Increasing resistance with time, 1C. And 2, what formula is used to calculate voltage in a circuit? E equals I times R, 2D. And 3, our schematic, what is component 8? That is a light-emitting diode, 3C. And 4, in which of the following circumstances may the control operator of an amateur station receive compensation for operating that station? When the communication is incidental to classroom instruction at an educational institution, 4D. And 5, which is equal to 2,425 megahertz? That is the same as 2.425 gigahertz, 5B. 6, which of these components can be used as an electronic switch? That would be a transistor, 6D. And 7, when are you required to transmit your call sign? The rule is at least every 10 minutes and during and at the end of a communication. So 10 minutes and at the end, 7A. And 8, what is a common repeater frequency offset in the 2-meter band? The standard is plus or minus 600 kilohertz, 8A. And 9, how is over-the-air access to IRLP nodes accomplished? That's the Internet Relay Linking Project. It's by using DTMF signals or touch tones on the keypad, 9D. And 10, what factors affect the RF exposure of people near an amateur station antenna? All of these: radiation pattern of the antenna, frequency and power level of the RF field, and the distance from the antenna, so 10D. And 11, what frequency range is referred to as VHF? That's 30 megahertz to 300 megahertz, 11B. And 12, which of the following is true when installing grounding conductors used for lightning protection? Sharp bends must be avoided, 12D. And 13, what weather condition might decrease range at microwave frequencies? Precipitation, 13D. And what is the symptom of RF feedback in a transmitter or transceiver? Reports of garbled, distorted, or unintelligible voice transmissions, 14D. And what is a LEO satellite? That's a satellite in low Earth orbit, 15A. And 16, which frequency is in the 6-meter amateur band? It's 52.525 megahertz, 16B. And what do the FCC rules state regarding the use of a phonetic alphabet for station identification? It is encouraged, 17C. And 18, this is a repeat from the previous test, which instrument can be used to determine SWR? Here's our friend, the directional watt meter, 18B. And 19, which of the following effects may allow radio signals to travel beyond obstructions between the transmitting and receiving stations? Knife edge diffraction, 19A. And 20, which of the following types of antenna offers the greatest gain? Of these, it would be the Yagi, 20A. And when under normal circumstances, may a technician class licensee be the control operator of a station operating in the amateur extra class band segment at no time, because they set the conditions, their class of license, and they don't have the right to operate in the extra class band, 21D. And 22, what is a good way to guard against electrical shock at your station? All of these: connect all AC-powered station equipment to a common safety ground, install mechanical interlocks and high-voltage circuits, and use 3-wire cords, 22D. And 23, what is the purpose of a squelch function? It's to mute the receiver audio when a signal is not present. 23B. And 24, what is the approximate bandwidth of AM fast scan TV transmissions? They're really wide, about 6 megahertz. 24A. And 25, what component changes 120 volt AC power to a lower AC voltage for other uses? That would be a transformer. 25D. And 26, what is the advantage of having multiple receive bandwidth choices on a multimode transceiver? Well, it permits noise or interference reduction by selecting a bandwidth that matches the mode. So 26C. 27, what type of transmission is indicated by the term NTSC? Or as we called it, never twice the same color. That's the analog fast scan color TV signal, analog TV, that we had before our digital TV. 27B, which hams still use. And 28, what is the unit of frequency? That's the hertz, named after Heinrich, 28A. And 29, which of the following battery chemistries is rechargeable? All of those. Nickel metal hydride, yes. Lithium ion, yes. Lead acid, yes. So 29A. And 30, which of the following conductors is preferred for bonding at RF? Flat copper strap, because it has the largest surface area. 30A. And 31, are amateur station control operators ever permitted to operate outside the frequency privileges of their license class? Yes, but only in situations involving the immediate safety of human life or protection of property. 31C.
Gary, along these lines, just to clear up any confusion, if I have a ham radio and I have my technician license and then later get my general, and I've got like a a dual mode FM handheld, and my wife, I'm not here, but my wife has danger to property and or her life, can she get on?
Under this rule, she could. She wouldn't have a call sign, but yes, under this rule, she could. But it would have to be,
Yep.
she'd have some explaining to do later, but yes.
Right, okay,
Yep.
thank you.
32, which of the following is a source of loss in coaxial feed line? Well, all of these. Water intrusion into the connectors, that can be a problem. Multiple connectors in the line will be a source of loss. And high standing wave ratio, so all of those, 32C. And 33, what is the formula used to calculate electrical power in a circuit? Power equals current times voltage, or P equals I times E, 33D. And 34, which of the following is used to convert a signal from one frequency to another? That's a mixer through a process called heterodyning, 34B. And finally, 35, what is the grace period for renewal of an amateur, if an amateur license expires? The grace period is 2 years. So if a license expires after 10 years, you have 2 years in which to renew it and get the license back without having to take the test again. That's the grace period. Again, no more than 9 wrong answers. I see some smiling faces.
To 31.
To 31, sure.
So doesn't that kind of go against the previous question that was, can a technician operate under an amateur?
Well, no, because that was not an emergency situation we were talking about then. It was could a technician operate in the extra class portion of the band routinely? No. In an emergency, yes.
Okay.
That's the difference. All right. Our classes are always free. They're going to continue to always be free. But we do say that if you'd like to donate to help the cause, there is a PayPal donation link at my website, w4eey.com. All monies received go toward the production of future classes and future videos like this. Let me go ahead and take off the spotlight and let me give you the opportunity. Any questions or comments before we go tonight? From you?
Gary, this has been very good. I really appreciate your, offering this, and thank you for also putting up where we can donate as well.
You betcha. And I was watching you. I was watching you. You were going along great there. So, Mark, you can do it. All right. Well,
My big thing is understanding this stuff, and I'm really gonna. When I get a radio and actually do it, that's when the hobby starts
absolutely. You get a license, and we say that it's a license to learn.
to burn.
So the next time I want to see you on the bands, I want to work you. We'll have a contact. Until that time, this is our last class. You'll hear my voice in your head when you take the test. So 73, y'all. And there's Bruce. You got a chance to see Bruce.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, y'all.
Bye. Bye.